Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's Tuesday Techniques. I almost made it on time, but I was trying to do a bit more prep and it just overran. So sorry about that, but welcome to those of you. I'll just give a bit of time for people to join live if you're available, and otherwise, if you're watching this in the replay, then it's great to see you and thanks for watching. So as you may know, these Tuesday technique sessions are a chance for us to explore some adjustments to patterns that you might be wanting to make for yourself, and to really tailor those patterns to fit your particular body shape and size. So we've gone through some basics of how to make some different adjustments over the last few months. And if you haven't seen those already, then please go back and have a look. So you'll find those on the website, which I'll just show you the address for here. So muchmorefun.co.uk. And if you haven't seen those, then definitely go back and have a look. We've covered lots of stuff around the basics of pattern adjustments, the basics of patterns themselves, and just some information that you might find generally helpful. So in this mini series that we're covering in the last few weeks, we're looking specifically at trousers. And I know this is a difficult topic for quite a lot of people, me included. So it's been really interesting to kind of dive into the research. And I've really thought a lot about this over the last week or so. So I've been thinking about ways that we can make it easier to make our adjustments and to know what's going on and why it's happening. And so today in particular, I want to cover something that is very helpful for me, which is a full bum adjustment. So I have quite a full bottom, and that makes buying trousers particularly difficult, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to be able to make trousers. But it also makes making trousers quite difficult because getting a good fit in that area can be a challenge. And so I'm working through this process with you guys, and I'm just kind of explaining what I'm doing to make my adjustments. And so you can see my real toiles and some of the things as we go along. So for those of you live, great to see you. Say hello. Lovely to have you here. If you have any questions as we go through, or anything particular you want me to cover, then please let me know. So in the last session that we did, we covered things like full tummy adjustments and things like that, and just some of the basics of the pattern adjustments. And today, like I say, we're going to be talking more around the back. So we're going to be looking really at the back profile and how those curves fit, and what we need to do to make adjustments to accommodate that. In next week's session, I'm going to be looking at a recap on my toile, where I've got to with that, and so you can see the kind of real adjustments that I've made. But also I'm going to be looking at full thigh adjustments, because again, that's another one that tends to go quite closely. If you have a full bum, quite often you'll have a full thigh as well. And I'm going to show you some pictures that kind of demonstrate that and why that might be the case. So hi Carl, lovely to see you, and great to have you here. And yeah, so we're just going to kind of get into it. So the first thing I thought was we might be best to cover why you might need a full bum adjustment, and how to assess whether you need that or not. So one of the things that I did was, and I'll talk about this in a few of the other sessions as well, which is just starting to learn about my own body shape and my own posture, so that I can start to spot why my fit might be different to someone else's. And one of the things that we talked about in the earlier sessions was around sort of standing with a light shining on you and your profile shining onto the wall, for example, because you can start to get a sense of, without all the sort of trappings of what you're wearing or anything like that, you start to get a sense of how your body shape is. And when I did that, I realized that my bottom was quite rounded, but also quite low. And so there are two kind of adjustments around that area, which will be helpful. And so starting to know that helped me start to look at, well, what adjustments can you make to trousers, and how do you do that, and what are the easiest ways to go about it? And so this was one of the ones that I knew I was going to have to make. And in talking to quite a lot of other people, it seems to be that we fall into maybe one of two camps. You've either got quite a flat bottom or you've got quite a full bottom. And so I just wanted to show you some examples of that. So if I just share my screen here. 1 second. Yeah, so I just took some pictures really off the internet, and I just thought it would be helpful to see. So these two are examples of kind of flat bottoms, and you can see hopefully that these are sort of fairly straight from the sort of back of the waist down. There's a slight curve, and then you straight into the thigh. And so when I'm talking about flat bottoms, this is what we're referring to. And so you'll see here there's not much of a curve sort of in the first. The back sort of goes fairly straight down, and you've got a small curve into the back of the thigh. As a contrast, these are what I would call full bottoms, and this is where you can definitely see a curve sort of at the back of the bottom here, and you can also see, as I mentioned, you start to also then see with people that have these features, me included, you also end up with a fuller thigh here as well. And some of this is to do with posture, but some of this is just to do with how our weight is distributed, and so it's really helpful to understand that. So if you have a full bottom, it's likely that you're going to need a full thigh adjustment as well. If you have a flat bottom, then you're more likely to be able to get away with the sort of straighter leg trousers maybe. You might find that you end up with lots of kind of wrinkles and things sort of under the bottom when you buy trousers, because they're a bit too long in this back crotch length here. And so you'll see on both of these profiles for the fuller bottoms, they sit in slightly different places. So this is what I was saying about it. Can either be sort of, your weight can be sort of higher up, or it can sort of sit lower down, sort of nearer the bottom part of your bottom. But again, on this lady here, she's also, you can see you've got kind of a more curved thigh at the front. And this is what I mean by a fuller thigh, whereas these ones are sort of much straighter in profile in terms of their shape. So hopefully that gives you some sense of an explanation of kind of what I'm talking about in this area. And so stand and look at yourself and kind of see, do you fall into one or other of these camps, or are you, if you're kind of in between, then you're lucky, because it's likely that trousers will fit you fairly well straight from the pattern. You won't need to make many adjustments. But if you're in either of these extremes, like, you know, the pictures I've shown you, or moving towards either of those, then it's likely that one of these adjustments will help you. So when you're assessing the fit of trousers, so we talked about making a toile, and I still believe that's a really good way to proceed when you're making trousers. And I would say as well to look for a pattern that doesn't have a lot of detail. So the pattern that we showed originally, I don't think I've got it to hand. I might have it here. Yeah, so I used this pattern originally because it's really basic. And I know it's got a bit of a flare in the leg, but don't really worry too much about that. We're mostly worried about fitting this sort of waist and hip area here. But this pattern's got like a really basic waistband. It's got 2 little darts on it. I think it's got like a side seam zip, which is also really helpful. But there's not a lot going on. It's not like those, you know, you kind of get those trousers that are like the paper bag trousers that have got quite a big waist thing going on here, or trousers that are elasticated. They're also quite hard to fit, surprisingly, because in many cases they've been adjusted and you can't kind of get this top waist and back curve fitting correctly. You also probably don't want to start with anything too low in the crotch, because again, you want to try and understand your own body shape and get those to fit that way. So I'd recommend something like that, reasonably close fitting, so that you can start to understand your own shape and size, and then you can always modify it and scale it to have all these other design features that you might want. Make elasticated waist, you know, put bigger waistbands on, all that kind of stuff. You can do all of that from a basic pattern. So so yeah, so when you're assessing, so once you've made your toile, so I think last time I showed you my toile, we'll just bring that up again so you can see. If I just minimize this, let's bring this one up. Yeah, so this was the toile I made last time, and I just wanted to show this again because there's a few things that I want to sort of talk through. So as I mentioned, I'm quite full in the bottom, and so as you'll see, there are some features here that demonstrate that I need a full bottom adjustment. So if I just try and zoom in a little bit, I put these balance lines on so that we could see the balance lines, and these are really helpful. You can kind of start to see where you might need your adjustments. So the first sign that you might need a bottom adjustment, is a full bottom adjustment, is that the waistband can often dip. Now you can't see that very well in this picture, but you can definitely see that the balance line here across my sort of mid hip, if you like, is definitely coming down, and it's trying to pull the fabric because the fabric isn't long enough in the crotch, so it's trying to pull that down. You can see that sort of dipping here, so that's why these lines are quite helpful, so you can start to see. You can also see how this is bowing out as well, because it's trying to take, I've got some fullness in the thigh and the sort of front, so around the hip, and so it's starting to try and pull some of the fabric. If we were to look at the side seam, you would see the side seams pulling forward as well, and that's trying to pull this fabric from the back to the front, so that's why this line here is curved. You'll also see that it's kind of, I think they call this hungry bum is the polite term, but you'll see that the crotch seam is going kind of into my bottom, and that's not super comfortable in all honesty. So you don't really want that happening. But again, it's because the crotch length isn't long enough, and it's trying to pull from the front. It's trying to pull all the fabric through to fit. And the other sign of that is that this inseam, you're kind of getting these wrinkles here as it's trying to pull around. So it's pulling the inseam sort of off grain, as it were, because it's trying to pull that up in the wrong direction. So all of these are signs that you might need a full bum or full bottom adjustment. And it's just the fabric trying to kind of accommodate these curves. In contrast, if you were to need a flat bottom adjustment, then it's more likely that you're going to have kind of sagging fabric. So I think I've got a picture in this book here actually that I can show you. So a flat seat or a flat bum is going to look more like this bottom picture here. So you'll see you get excess fabric and wrinkles kind of under the bottom here because this crotch length is too long. And what it's trying to do is there's just too much fabric coming back here. And again, you probably would see the inseam sort of leaning more towards the back as well if you were to be able to see that. So it just means that there's just too much fabric in these areas here. And so we would want to do the opposite adjustment. So we're going to look at both of those adjustments today. Yeah, and then the other thing that I wanted to cover, which I'm probably going to do more next time, is when I was trying to work out how we can break this down into stages. And I think one of the things that I was going to try actually with my toile is undoing the crotch seam and just wearing the toile as if it was a skirt. Imagine it was a skirt, because if you can get that to balance correctly on your hips, without the crotch seam kind of getting in the way, then that's going to tell you whether, do you remember like we talked about with the top, if you've got a shoulder seam, you want everything to hang from the shoulders. We want that the trousers to hang from that sort of waist and hip girdle. So we're going to just try and get that to fit first. And then if we can get that to fit nicely, and then from the back of the body, you can see that it's hanging straight down. And then from the front of the body, it's hanging straight down. And at the side seams, you can see that your side seams are vertical as well. Then you'll know that that whole girdle is right. And then all you've got to think about is the inseam and that kind of in crotch curve as well. So I'm going to play with that, and I'll give you an update on that next time in the session. But this adjustment that I've got to show you today is relatively straightforward. You can do a major adjustment or a minor adjustment, depending on how much you need to modify by. Now, for me, I'm going to probably need a more major adjustment. So a minor adjustment is kind of up to about 1/2 inch. So if you needed to add about 1/2 inch to that crotch length, then you could use this first method. Or if you need to remove 1/2 inch, then you could use this first method. If you need to make a bigger adjustment, then you would use the major adjustment that I'm going to show you. So I've just got a few samples cut out here, and I just want to just show you those first. So if I just change my camera. Oh, yeah, obviously if I plug this one in. Sorry about that. Let me just wire this up. Okay, so we've got some little kind of examples here of patterns. I'll just zoom out a little bit, this out of the way. Yeah, and so the first adjustment that we're going to look at is for the full bottom, but just with a minor adjustment. So you can extend, we're only going to make these adjustments because it's to do with the back of the body. We're going to make these on the back of the pattern. So I've just got a couple of pattern examples kind of cut out here. So when we're making these adjustments, what we're going to be looking to do is, so just to talk about the anatomy of the pattern piece. So this is the side seam that's going to be going down the side of your body. Then this is the crotch seam that we've talked about. So this is going to go from your waist down and through your legs. And when this is assembled, you will end up that the front of the pattern and the back of the pattern will join together at this seam and this seam. And then you'll sew a seam all the way through the body for the crotch seam here. So that just kind of hopefully gives you a bit of context of where we're looking. And wherever there's a seam, it's kind of the same as having a dart. So if you imagine, it allows us to create shape. So the reason why this works is because as we bend, as we kind of sew the seams around, can you see as I'm sewing the seam for this side seam, for example, it's not straight. So what that's going to do is it's going to curve the top piece in a bit more than this side piece, and that's what gives us our shaping into the waist. But the same also is true of this back seam here. And again, you might see it shaped on dresses or tops, that kind of thing. You'll often see that the back seam is sometimes shaped to curve into the small of the back, for example. And similarly with a skirt. Now, often the centre back seam is fairly straight, and then we use these darts to give us some shaping. But with trousers, we can use this back seam. And what's happening is, again, as this is curving round underneath, we're also using this back seam to create an angle in towards the waist as well. So this is acting a bit like a dart. As these are sewn together, that's going to sort of curve inwards. And this is why trousers are so difficult, because you've got kind of things moving in 3 dimensions. And that's why it's sometimes difficult to see what adjustments we need to make. Right, so the simplest change that we're going to make for if we just want to do a small adjustment is that we can, if we want to increase the back crotch length, what we can do is we can just add in extend the crotch line by up to 1/2 an inch. So in this case, we can bring this line out. So if we had our piece of paper, we can just bring our line out. And we're going to do that by up to 1/2 an inch for this minor adjustment. And then all we're going to do is blend that back in. So if that's my 1/2 an inch there, then I'm just going to blend that back in to about where the knee point is. So you just want a nice smooth line. And so that's the simplest kind of our first adjustments. So we've just got a small amount. Zoom this in a little bit for you. Yeah, so we've got a small amount here that we're just going to add in, and we're just going to extend whatever the sort of angle of that line is. We're just going to extend that out. So that's the simplest. Now, if you've got, so that this is for a full bottom. Okay. So counter to that, if you've got a flat bottom, then what you want to do is shorten this crotch length. But if we take it all out of here, sometimes that can affect the width of the thigh here, and you may still want the room in here. So what's often recommended is to split the difference between this point here and also to take some off the back length here. So you can, so let's say we wanted to make again a total of a 1/2 inch adjustment. What we could do is take 1/4 inch off here. So we would make this shorter by 1/4 inch, and then we would take 1/4 inch off at the waist. Okay, and then all we would do is blend, again, you'd blend this line down towards your knee line to where the knee point is, and then you would do the same kind of across your waist as well. So you would fold out your dart. I'm not going to do that on this cardboard, but you get the idea. And you would take some off this top length here. Oops, sorry, you can't see that. You would fold out your dart, and then you would redraw your waistline here. So you would take 1/4 inch off here and 1/4 inch off here, and that would give you your total of 1/2 inch. So that's for a flat bottom. And that's just a small quick adjustment that you can make. So if you need to modify more than that, so maybe you need to go kind of bigger than 1/2 inch adjustment, then you're going to need to use this second method. So in this second method, I'm just going to try and make this a bit lighter because it's gone a bit dark. There we go. Better. So I'll just move this out of the way. So in the second method, we're going to use what we've used before, which is this kind of cut and slide type technique that we've used, where we've marked out the pattern and then we've slid either in or out with a pattern piece, with a section of the pattern to make our adjustments. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to draw our lines. Now on your pattern piece, I've only got a scaled down pattern piece here, but on your pattern piece, you're going to draw a line that is 4 inches from the crotch line down, and then another one that is 4 inches from the crotch line up. Okay, and so if you measure that on your pattern, and then you're going to draw a line that is at right angles to the grain line. Okay, so I'm just going to draw my line in here, and you just want it to probably be about sort of 5 or 6 inches long. And then I'm going to come down here, similar sort of place, and again I'm just checking that it's parallel with my grain line, at right angles to my grain line. I'm just going to draw another line here. And then the last thing that we're going to do is just draw a line that is parallel with the grain line so that we can cut along here. And we're going to cut out this section in the middle. Okay, so I'm just going to take my scissors and cut my piece. And then, like we've done before, what we're going to do is I'm just going to secure that. Just grab some tape. Secure this piece so that you can see. So that's our 4 inches above and below. Okay, and then depending on whether we want to make a full adjustment or a full bum adjustment or a flat bum adjustment, we're going to move this pattern piece in or out along this line. And what that's going to do is it's either going to extend the curve because we're bringing it out and we're going to blend this in, or it's going to make the curve smaller. So we're going to bring this in this direction. So if we start with taking it out, then once we've decided how far we want it to come, and again, this might be a bit of trial and error. So you can open out the back crotch seam and see if you can, and then put the toile back on and then see how wide the opening is. That might give you some clues. You could also try doing it at the side seam. So you could open the side seam, and although it's not the same place, you'll start to see where the fabric's sort of pulling in, and it might give you some sense of how big an adjustment you need to make. So this will then extend this length in the back seam here. So let's say we've decided, so decide how much you want to make the adjustment by, and that's going to be this measurement here. So this is going to add on an amount, the amount that you want is in here. Okay, and so let's just stick that down for now. And then what you want to do is you're going to take your curved ruler, or you can do it by eye. This is fairly straight along here on this particular pattern, so you could sort of blend this in, but what you're looking for is to sort of blend this curve sort of back up to the waist point, and you'll see you'll add some on in this upper kind of back area, and then you're taking a little bit off here to make this curve, to blend this curve. Similarly, you're going to do the same at the crotch side, and it's also, if you notice, you're going to get a bit of extra width at the thigh, which again sometimes you do want, particularly as we mentioned, it's often pulling, this tends to go together with a full thigh anyway, so you might want this to give you a bit more space. So again, with your curved ruler, I'm just doing it with this straight ruler, you're going to want to blend towards the knee point, so you're going to sort of bring this, in fact I'm going to just do it here, bring this down and blend it in towards the knee. So you're going to take a little bit off and add a little bit on where you need it. But ultimately, we've moved this crotch point out, and therefore we have lengthened this curve here. And so that gives you your adjustment. It just means you're going to have a bit more fullness across the bottom here, and then that's going to just sit better for you. As an alternative to that, you might want to make a flat bottom adjustment, a bigger flat bottom adjustment. Oh, I should say here, you can make this adjustment for, let me just see what my measurements say in my notes. Yeah, so up to 1 inch. If you're a size 16 or under, then you can probably adjust by about 1 inch, and that should be okay as a maximum. If you're size 16 or greater, then you can do up to 1.5 inches here, and that will blend in. So that's that adjustment. If you want to do it the other way, so let's say you want to do a flat bottom adjustment, just take this off, then what you're going to do is you're going to split again, in this case, like we did with the small adjustment. probably better to take a tiny bit of it off this top length here. And so if you make an adjustment here of up to 1/2 inch at this point here, then that's going to help with the length of the back crotch at this top point, and it will stop you kind of bunching up in this mid back sort of section here. So again, you're going to blend from your waist to that point there for your to take some of this length out here. So that's up to about 1/2 inch, and then the remainder you can take off here. So the thing that's going to constrain you here is that you don't want this line to go past straight. So if I just draw this in here, that's kind of the most of the adjustment that you can make. So you can only go in as far as that. If you try and take it in even further, then that's just not going to work, because the leg shape isn't going to work. So there's a maximum that you can kind of take in here depending on the design of the trousers. So you can take it in as far as that, and then you would blend. We probably put a bit of a curve on this actually, but you don't want to go any further than that straight line. And once you've got that in there, again, you would check that this is lined up. And then what you would do is, again, just use your curved ruler and just draw your crotch curve back in, just to blend in with that new crotch point. And again, you can see we're going to be taking some out of this back hip as well. So it will take all the bagginess sort of out of this sort of back mid hip area as well. And then you'll just draw your new line. You blend that new line to the knee, and then that will kind of come down then to the bottom of the trousers. So you'll see how that will adjust, and then try it again and see how that fits. So hopefully quite straightforward adjustments, relatively easy to make. But the trick, I guess, is in trying it out, you know, having a real pattern, giving it a go and trying that out. There's one other adjustment that you might want to make, which is to, if you've got quite a low bottom, then what you might find is that the crotch curve is a bit too curved. So for me, I've got a bit of a sort of flat shelf under my bottom, but if you look at the trouser patterns, they all start to curve fairly quickly up into the back curve. So if I just explain a bit more on the pattern what I mean. So again, we're just focusing on, I'm just going to bring this in a bit closer. If we're focusing on this back curve, if I just swap this one out. See that okay? So we're just focusing on this back curve here, and then it comes to a point there. Can you see on here that it comes out a little way, and then it starts to curve up quite quickly. But what can happen is, if you've got a bit of a this is going to go between your legs, and then this is going to come up, and then this is actually, when you're wearing it, going to curve back in, because this is kind of like we said, having a dart in the back of the centre back. But what you might find is you need a bit more after you've lengthened it, which is fine. Doing that adjustment is going to lengthen it, but it's still going to keep this curve the same. And what you might find is that you might need to extend the curve so that it stays straight for a bit longer. And so sometimes you can just take out a bit more from this curve, and that will just accommodate a bit more fullness in the bottom. So it allows for this more low hanging bottom, as opposed to if your weight is sort of further up, then you're going to want to, you can leave this as it is. But if your flesh is kind of closer to your thighs, then you might want to just give yourself a bit more room here. So again, just modifying this crotch curve as well, to just carve out a bit more space can really help. The beauty of that second adjustment is that you can do it on the same toile. So all you're going to do is, where you would have sewn your seam, if you just draw a line in from the bottom of the curve and just re-sew that crotch seam a bit further in, then you can test this out and see whether it's better or worse, without actually having to create a whole new toile. Okay, so that's everything that I've got for you today. What I'm going to do by next time is I'm going to play around with my toile and give you some feedback. Next time we're going to cover a full side adjustment. There are different ways of doing that depending on where you carry your weight, whether it's at the front or the sides or the kind of inside of your leg. So we'll have a look at some of those different ones. And hopefully I'll be able to give you a bit more feedback on my toile. I'd really love to know how you're getting on. If you're trying this and following this process, then please let me know, send me some photos, let me see kind of how your fitting's going, all those kind of things. What's working for you, what's not working, because there's more that we kind of understand about each other's body shapes. We can maybe sort of use that in our own adjustments. So thank you very much. Thanks, Carl, for joining me. And if you're watching in the replay, then, you know, so thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hope you found it useful. And I'll see you next time when we cover a bit about those big thighs. Bye for now.